assistance to technical advisory unit at the ACPS Secretariat for making remarks at the end. When we are dealing with questions, we could also invite him if there's need for certain clarity to answer points as we go along, Perry, right? And then we'll allow Gerard to do wrap up. It makes no sense if he has pressing issues or clarification points to leave him till the end. So if he could provide clarity, if we are a bit unsure, we'll allow him to come in during the response to the questions, right? And then Dr. Greenidge from SIDEMA will close. All right, so I think we'll start now, Perry. Can you put up the open slide?
Okay.
Thank you. Because we have, first of all, let me bring greetings on behalf of Professor John Agard, who is the UE lead on this particular project, who wasn't able this morning to join us. He'd asked me to bring greetings from him to you. As you all will see, and you all would know, because we've circulated documentation on the project already, the project is part of the AC African and Caribbean Pacific States project on innovation. And it has been, the particular project is titled Harnessing Innovation Technologies to Support Resilient Settlements on the Coastal Zones of the Caribbean. And therefore, there were various aspects of the ACP EU Innovation Call, and we chose to emphasize the issue of digital and modeling technologies and its area of application as the coastal zones of the Caribbean. Settlements in the coastal zone, as you know, that really is the majority of settlements because most of the people in the Caribbean live on the coastal zone. So it's not very limiting. It could really apply generally to settlements in the Caribbean. As you know, the Caribbean feels the impacts of climate change, and therefore the idea is to promote more resilient settlements in the coastal zones through the better planning and management supported by innovation and technology in the area. Next slide, Perry. Yeah. Perry, can you go on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So these are just some background issues, and that is that no, can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So what we do know is that the planning and management of settlements in the coastal zone are hampered by various things, decision-making, information availability, resource allocations, proper policies, and so on. And therefore, while we talk about the use of innovative technologies, modeling, digital technologies, etc., we fully understand when you look at when we will deal with the project objectives, that these things are grounded in a range of different types of issues which may need to be reformed as well to proper include the new available techniques to improve planning and management in the coastal zone. We have two formal partners in the process. The University of Western is the lead, and SIDEMA and Anton de Kom University of Suriname are our partners in implementing the project. As you said, the project is co-funded by the ACP Innovation Fund, and which was implemented across the ACP regions and is funded by the European Union. Next slide, please, Barry. All right. So the core objective The overall objective, as we state, is climate smart and resilient coastal settlements in the Caribbean region. That is the overall objective of our project. But specifically, on the basis of the call, it is to support the implementation of digital and modeling technologies in planning and management of coastal development and its use in the agencies and relevant other actors in the region. Primarily, as we said, we want to see how it deals with the issue of climate change and natural disasters, which are perennial problems in the region. However, we do understand, like I said before, that you cannot simply implement new innovative technologies outside of the context of the institutions, the policies, the laws. So I'll just put it out right now. While the focus is on that, it would be very legitimate to have projects which have either as its core focus or important parts of its focus to assess what are the restrictions in law, policy, etc., that prevent it from being implemented, and also to look at the broader, we want people to look at the broader environment within the countries for innovation, because sometimes it is broader issues about implementing innovation and that prevent specific implementation of particular innovations, right? And of course, whatever we propose, we'd like to see that it has some ability to scale up and replicate in other parts of the Caribbean. Perfectly legitimate if it is only useful in one country, but it will be an advantage if it can be scaled up and replicated in other countries in the region. Perry, next model, please. Next slide. Can you go to the next slide, Perry, please? Are you hearing me, Perry? Folks, sorry about that. We have a little technical problem here. As usual, yeah. Okay. So while he gets the full slide on the screen, the outputs, the prime output would be digital regionally replicable tools for predicting, measuring, providing evidence-based decision-making, the capturing of data and the analysis of data, modeling, etc., that support planning and management of coastal settlements, especially to deal with resilient coastal development against climate change and disasters. As a mouthful, we do want to make sure that the technologies that are being proposed and innovations can be embedded within the agencies and the communities within the region, and that these types of innovations support or use co-developed policy recommendations for improving national policy frameworks, so that we would want dialogue within it. What are the implementation of a specific project, how it can support improvement of the overall environment for adopting and implementing innovation. So while we have the primary output as the first one, and the focus is around that, the second and the third outputs are integral parts of the project, and different types of project can have slightly different emphases on it, right? So if, for example, there's a well-known technique that has been attempted, well-known, the technique is proven, and what really is the case in a particular environment is there are legislative and institutional restrictions on it, then in that particular case, the emphasis can be on various of the other secondary outputs of it. So these are the descending orders. The first one is the primary output, and the second and the third are additional outputs of the proposals that we hope submitted, but you can have different levels of emphasis of the various outputs. Next slide, please, Perry. Right. So these are competitive grants. We will go through in a bit the requirements of application, the application form, budgets, the logical framework, the stakeholders report. Those are very well laid out in the guidelines and the application form. And we will go through those in some detail with you in a little while. The range of the funding of the projects are 200,000 to 400,000. Those of you all who are aware of the project, earlier on, as we've increased the budgets for the projects from the pilot call, and the projects have to be initiated and completed implementation within 2 years, so that falls within the overall project life. There are no formal co-financing requirements as in previous projects we have worked with some of you all on, but we are suggesting that people examine the way in which the project is implemented and submit documents that can provide in-kind or voluntary co-financing and project support. The idea is that we want these projects over a period of time to become self-financing, replicable, vested in the various agencies. And those are best done when you start to mobilize parallel and additional funds other than the specific grant funds, right? So we'll provide further details of these different requirements in the presentation by Dr. Pola to follow. Next slide, please, Perry. All right. So we did have a pilot phase that ran earlier in the year. 5 applicants submitted proposals, and these are generally some of the outputs of that. Most of the applicants, all 5, demonstrated the capacity to implement the project with scores, as you said, from 69 to 82%, well above the 50% cutoff requirements. We found that 4 out of the 5 projects were feasible with ranges up, with 4 of them above 50%, 1 just barely below. So most of the applicants demonstrated the feasibility to implement the project. The scoring around what we consider the innovation potential was not quite what we wanted, while the projects themselves were very interesting. We had 2 of them very specifically above, and the other 3 marginal in terms of the innovation potential. They were able to demonstrate the sustainability of the proposals. All 5 of the projects were able to demonstrate the sustainability of the proposals they had made. Right? Perry, next slide, please. All right. Now, unfortunately, none of the 5 applicants were found eligible based on what we call the Annex M, or the eligibility criteria established in the overall broader ACP project. And the key element, the key problem, which we will talk about, and we've had further discussions with OSAP on this, is how do we provide evidence for 2 R&I projects during the required period. That is 2 projects that demonstrate 2 things. One is the ability of the applicant to manage funds and projects of this kind, and experience in research and innovation projects, right? So we have here, we put forward our definition of research, which is the process of inquiry and collection of and analysis of evidence in developing new areas of knowledge to build expertise and to input these into the overall development process. Whereas an innovation is a process, idea, invention, or particular product that is new, creates new value, enhances existing operations, provides solutions, etc. So we want to be sure that when people put forward, we'll talk a bit more about this, projects which demonstrate the experience, that they have substantial elements of R&I. They cannot be a little element of R&I. They must have substantial components. They don't have to be completely an R&I project, because they can have various other aspects, but they cannot be also then purely, a capacity building type project, right? And what we don't want is projects that have large elements of simply procuring goods and services in it. They must have substantial elements. So the projects don't have to be completely R&I, but they need to have substantial R&I elements, and those need to be properly explained in the write-up of the projects when they're submitting them as experience. And then there are a range of types of documents which take some time to prepare, and we'd like at the beginning of the proposal and in parallel with developing the technical aspects to this call, that you look at the requirements and start to collect that information. And of course, the earlier this information, we have an open door policy. If you submit an application and you have some preliminary documentation on eligibility or certain aspects of it, and you want to send that for us so we could review it, we could have a discussion with the ACP EU on them to see whether they will meet the requirements. So well ahead of the final submission, we can help you along the way in making sure that your proposal meets the requirements of the project call. All right. So what I'm going to do is, unless there are one or two very burning questions, which I will take one or two, I will hold off until we have more details presented on the requirements on the application form and the call presented by Dr. Pola. And we also have available here, for example, Denise Betis, who is our evaluation expert attached to the project. And we have a couple of other people from the EWI system who are part of the management of the project, who have good, clear understanding and experience working in the field of innovation in the Caribbean. All right, so I don't see any pressing questions from anyone. So what I'd like to do is to allow Dr. Pola to get into the meat of the application form and the guidelines for the open call. Perry?
Sure. I think to have, let me just get back my presentation. All right. Try again. I'm seem to, okay, right, there it is. Okay. All right. Okay, today I will be speaking more on the guidelines and the application forms. We're going to go through the eligibility criteria, the application form, the budget, the logical framework, the stakeholder report, the declaration of honor, the evaluation process, and timelines. After each section, I will stop and allow people to ask any questions that they have before I move on to the next section. Now, we've shared the guidelines and the application forms already, so you would already be familiar with it, but this is a good opportunity for clarification. Now, in terms of eligibility criteria, the organization must be a legal person or registered entity, which is basically you are an organization and you have documents to prove it. Now, it needs to be established before 2017 in at least one CARIFORUM country, except Bahamas. So that would be most of the islands of the Caribbean, including Dominican Republic. Now, as
Bahamas,
Asad would have,
Montserrat.
yeah, except Montserrat, sorry.
Okay.
Right. They would have had to directly implement 2 research and innovation projects. This is the lead applicant for the amount of €75,000 each between 2018 to 2022. And as Dr. Mohammed would have said, we can't just have procurement projects and capacity building projects. They really do have to demonstrate that they are research and innovation projects. And they have to be, the lead organization has to show that it's directly responsible for the preparation and management of the activities being funded. So if we go on to what types of organizations can be lead applicants, it should be organizations that conduct some level of research. So private companies can do it, universities, research institutes, innovation hubs, NGOs, government agencies, ministries. All these organizations, based on what we've been discussing, are applicable. They have to show that they demonstrate some research. Now, the lead applicant does not have to demonstrate expertise in the subject matter. This was our challenge in the pilot, that the lead was both the subject experts and and such, and we ran into problems. So based on discussions, it's been agreed that they don't have to be an expert in the area, but once they meet the requirements, that is to manage 2 R&I projects and be a legally registered entity since 2017 in a CARIFORUM country, except Montserrat. Now, to provide technical expertise, they could partner with other organizations who have technical expertise, or even contract persons who have such. And at this point, I'd like to encourage you to make use of the chat, that if any of you are interested in partnering, just put your something about your company and just mention that you're interested in partnering if you're not considering to be a lead applicant. And if you're a lead applicant, by all means, you can mention, and you're looking for partners, by all means, mention this in the chat. You might find people that you could collaborate with. Now, co-applicants are not lead applicants, and they don't need to submit any of the eligibility documents, but they must be from CARIFORUM countries, which means that we can't pool together people's requirements. The lead applicant has to be the one that submits all the documents. Now, third parties could be from CARIFORUM countries or even non-CARIFORUM countries. So third applicants might be organizations that you're contracting. Now, if it happens to be from a non-CARIFORUM country, whatever activity that they are doing has to be something that cannot be done within the region or the country. It cannot be done locally. So whatever expertise they're bringing has to be unique, that you cannot source from elsewhere. And it has to be a very clear contract that defining the terms of reference. This is what we are wanting you to do. But like I said, if you can keep all the activities within the CARIFORUM region, then it's better for the project. But you do have the option. Now, there are a lot of documents that are required, which between the University of the West Indies and the EU, we came up with a list. Now, a certificate of incorporation is a good way of showing whether or not if you're registered in 2007 and your country. So that's why we decided on a certificate of incorporation. The notice of the board of directors or the appropriate documentation is just some documentation to show who is managing your organization, the structure of it. We would need certified copies of audited financial statements, given that we are giving you a large grant. Now, we would need a letter from your board of directors or whoever's heading the organization, stating that yes, you all are willing to accept responsibility for managing this grant. Okay, and that you all will be directly responsible for managing managing it if you all are awarded. Now, the Declaration of Honor, this is basically the EU has exclusion criteria. I'll get into it a little more later on, but there are things that your organization can't be involved in, right? Like fraud, and it can't be bankrupt and such. And so this document we're sending to you is just a list of the things that your organization, you're just signing to say that you're auditors from the institutions that have provided financial support, right? So these are donor letters. So we would want those donor letters from whether it be UNDP or IDB. The project has been in excess of 75,000. It's been conducted between 2018 to 2022, or they, give them specific dates. And if it is closed, yes, you could state that. If it's ongoing, you could state that. So, we want some detail in the donor letters.
Perry, can I just come in and provide one?
No, yeah, sure, sure.
The projects don't have to have been completed. They could be ongoing, right? So it must be, the project must meet the criteria, and the project must be initiated and could be ongoing, right? So they don't have to be two projects that have been completed within that period. That's just, there was a question in the chat on that. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay,
excellent. Right. So documentation from your organization, we would also like, if it is that your accounts department could give a letter stating, yes, you all did award you all didn't even be from your higher ups, but at least something stating, yes, we received these funds, we managed it. Now, contracts. Signed contracts are very useful in demonstrating eligibility. We would really like to see the signed contract. And the write-up on the R&I application form, we are recommending that you do a standard write-up and send it to us as soon as possible. But I'll get to that in the next slide. As was mentioned earlier, we have an open door policy. The problem we had in the pilot phase was demonstrating eligibility. So we are saying, if you send us a certain documents early, and I put March 31st as the early deadline, but you can send us anytime, at any point, but I encourage you to send it early. The certificate of incorporation, something showing your organization has been read. Send that as well. That will really help. But the signed project contracts and a write-up on the RDI aspects of the project. Even if you have just the last one, please send it to me and I will forward it to our technical advisor unit from the ACP, see if your project is eligible or not eligible. So if you can send me these three documents, or even the last one, it will be greatly appreciated, just to demonstrate the RDI projects.
Perry, can I just come in here again quickly?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Some of our discussions based on the pilot call that we had discussions with the TU at the ACP EU, is that it may be possible if you have core funding, for example, if the applicant has what I call core funding from a donor, and it is very clearly stated what the objectives of that core funding, and there are substantial parts of it which support well-organized R&I activities within the organization that they must account and report for. That can also be considered once it is over the requirements of a project. It doesn't have to be a specific project. It would be R&I, substantial R&I components within core funding to the organization, which comes from a donor, and that they have to report and demonstrate that those activities are being undertaken or have been undertaken. And we could perhaps get a little clarity on that from the TAU when we get around to getting his inputs on it.
Just to add that a little bit, it doesn't even have to come from a donor. If the organization is executing an internal project, which means it has the appropriate documents, the TOR, the contract, something to demonstrate that's a project, and it's executed within your agency for the amount, then it's eligible. But it has to be demonstrated as organization executed. So that would also count. Okay, okay, any questions on the eligibility requirements before I get into the application form? I see, right. Are you able to, Mike? Yes, okay.
Hi, good morning. Haley Anderson from the ODPM. I think the answer already, but I just want to confirm. In terms of organizations established by cabinet notes, would this meet the eligibility criteria? Thank you. Over.
Yes, it should meet the eligibility criteria. We just wanted to demonstrate that your organization is from the country, a CARIFORUM country, except Montserrat, and the year of establishment. So a cabinet note will be fine.
Thank you.
Haley, just to say that the ODPM would actually be an organization that has line items in the budget of the Ministry of National Security.
Okay,
right?
I'm seeing Ronald Rupnarayan. Ronald, could you unmute?
Thanks, Perry. Good morning, everyone. In terms of the eligibility thing, my real concern is really that, you know, a lot of the projects, if you're applying through a developmental agency within the region, much of the projects will be focused. They will have research and innovation elements, but much of them will have capacity building and other aspects attached to it. So the concern is really with a focus on research and innovation, which is fine because it has to fit the requirements of the project. It is, in my opinion, it is very difficult to find or to have projects that would have covered primarily research and innovation for that sum of money in that space of time, which is basically what I placed on the chat, and perhaps one of the reasons why none of the projects, despite being technically sound, were accepted. The second part of that leads us to the whole nature of how research is done in our region. Much of the research would be done by, you know, research institutions, which would be the universities, etc. And the mere fact that the project itself, based on the eligibility criteria, and the fact that UE is one of the grantees, and UE is, you know, debarred from applying, to me that is counterproductive to some extent, because if you want to have research and innovation, research institutions should be able to apply. And secondly, as I mentioned before, the overall criteria, if you're going through any sort of regional developmental agencies and you want research and innovation, it may be a difficult ask. So I just wanted to raise that to see what, you know, everyone thinks about it. Thanks.
Can I just point people to clarification from Gerard Denouden in the chat on the nature of the R&I experience? He didn't verbally intervene, but he's put a comment in the chat. And in response to Ronald, we're not saying that the projects have to be completely R&I. We are saying they must have substantial R&I components that are demonstrated and can prove the ability of the organization to carry on R&I components. And we have had some very useful clarification discussions with the TAU and the ACP EU on the matter. And hopefully we would, once we get the documents a little early, we can have a discussion on how the information that is needed is presented in a way that you can demonstrate the requirements of the eligibility criteria. So we've had some discussions on that, and we're hoping that some of the types of issues that are generally encountered in the region by most of the applicants in the pilot stage, hopefully we can provide some clarity in moving forward at the open call stage.
Thanks, Doc.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to add to that a little bit, this is why we emphasize the idea that the lead organization doesn't have to have the technical expertise. So maybe a Ministry of Science and Technology, maybe a Ministry of Planning, maybe a Ministry of Finance, maybe a regional agency, that an agency that deals with research and innovation. Maybe they are, or they could be considered as, they could potentially be eligible as the lead. And maybe you could have discourse with organizations like that, whereby your organization provides the technical expertise. So we have to be creative to be successful, because we have not been successful in the pilot phase, and we're hoping this new knowledge will allow us to be successful in the open call phase by allowing grants to be available. Okay, I think if no more questions, I'll
Terry,
just
there are comments.
There are comments
that I have to respond to in the chat around the ability to provide signed project contracts. They've raised the issue that for intellectual property reasons, this may not always be possible, and we accept that may not always be possible. But certainly a write-up and some formalization that there is such a project, maybe a letter from the donor or the contractor would suffice. Once the project write-up and there's some formal letter notifying if the project contract can be provided. That was a little discussion around a few of the people on it. So it would be preferable if we could get a signed contract, project contracts, but if that is not possible, we may be able to work with alternate documentation that demonstrates that this is a formal activity.
Yes. This is where the donor letters even might become valuable. We could have a discourse with the TAU, but whether or not the donor letters alone, but the more support, donor letters are external verification, contracts and these sort of things are internal verification, but we could have a discussion with what you are, what you can submit to us and not, or not. So any other questions, or can we move on to application form?
I would say one more clarification, Perry, and it's in following up in Gerard's comment. If there's the utilization of core internal funding of an organization, and out of their core funding, they are contracting specific R&I elements and submitting that as eligibility criteria, in that particular case, we would need to see the contracts. Right?
Yeah.
If you're using internal funding and you're procuring these services, we'd want to see more formalization documentation on it, right? But if it is external funding and there's problems for reasons of submitting it, intellectual property reasons, or it's an intergovernmental thing that falls under that, then we'll need to have some formal documentation, if not the contract, to demonstrate there's a real project, real activities, real set of subcomponents and so on the project.
I'm seeing Nikisha hand is up. Can you make your contribution?
My colleague Matthew, he has a question he would like to ask. Matthew, you can go ahead.
Hi, morning. Just trying to confirm the amount of certification letters needed for this early confirmation. Is it 2?
One for each project. It will be 2 because it's 2 separate projects. You have to prove. Yeah.
So it's 2 signed project contracts and 2 certification letters from 2 projects.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
So one each for, yes. Okay, any other letter? Any other questions? Okay, so I think,
I'll just answer Lloyd's question.
okay,
Lloyd, you don't have to create something new. Application or adoption of an existing technology in a local context is itself an innovation that requires rethinking of a known technology. So taking a technology off what we call the technology shelf, proven in another environment, and then adapting it and applying it in a particular context that is different to a local context, that could be considered an innovation as well.
okay. I'm
It's
seeing,
not just created from you.
yeah, I'm seeing a question. Are third-party UE research institutions personnel eligible to apply as the lead or can be contracted by the lead? And my understanding is that yes, UE, SEDIMA, and Atticus could be contracted by the grantee. If you are awarded a grant project and you get specific expertise that these organizations could supply, but it may not be the organization necessarily that you're contracting, but you might be contracting an individual from these organizations with the technical expertise. So as far as I'm aware, it is possible at once you receive the grant, and that you could put it in the application. But yes, it can be eligible. Yeah.
Let us not fudge around this issue.
Mhm.
What we don't want, what we cannot do, is we cannot have a shadow applicant submitting as a lead and the project really being technically implemented by any of the partners. That will not be acceptable. That will break the rules of the project. What you may be implying is if there is a specific component, that there is a technical requirement, and an individual working within one of these organizations has a unique regional technical capacity, and they're contracted to do something, that could be considered, but not contracting the organization, UE, SEDIMA, or Atticus, to do it. I think that would be in contravention of the rules, right? So it will have to be some unique specialization of some individual, because UE people are allowed outside of the institutional rules to do individual technical consulting and research and so on. It will have to be in that very limited scope.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll run into problems. Yeah.
Okay. I see Nikishia has her hand up again.
Right. I'm actually, I have an interest in the question that Simone Lewis asked, and I don't believe it was answered. She posted it in the chat.
Could you repeat the question, therefore, for me?
Simone asked, in GWP-C's case, most of the eligibility requirements mentioned were met. However, we were unsuccessful. Can you explain the reason for this?
Okay. Basically, what it boiled down to, it was the interpretation of the R&I element in the project. It didn't meet the burden of that was set. So while yeah, so that's what it basically boiled down to. That we what was submitted, it just didn't meet the requirements of being considered an R&I project.
Is it possible for you to be more specific, because it still sounds very, very, very vague? There seems to be not clarity on the matter of the eligibility. So is it possible for you to be specific, especially as it relates to the question that Simone asked?
I will add something, and Perry can answer, and this is something which perhaps can get some response from the TAU as well. The issue is not that it did not have R&I components. It was clear that it did. The issue was there enough of it? and there was a substantial enough component given the overall project that that warranted being, and that it was felt that a large part of the components of the project was really around capacity building. Now, capacity building can also include research to support capacity building. And this is a clear case where the way in which the project is presented and it is explained and the components clarified very early on in the project would make it a little easier for us to do that. And I feel that perhaps the write-up of the project may have suffered from inadequate explanation of the R&I components compared to the others and its relationship to the relationship of the research and innovation components in supporting capacity development. So
Okay.
I think early on, to avoid these problems early on in the project, that's why we've asked that we get some documentation of it very early on, and we could look at the way in which you present. Sometimes it may be legitimately a project with the components, but it's not presented in a way that allows us to digest and discern that. So I don't know if Gerard wants to intervene and add any responses to this.
Okay, I'm not seeing Gerard, but I'm seeing Simone. If Gerard is unable to respond, Simone?
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Perry. No, it's unfortunate though, because this wasn't communicated to us, and you know, we were submitting all the other required documents. So based on what was stated, does it mean that then we can resubmit, but maybe changing the scope a little bit, that it doesn't fully focus on capacity building, or is not so much a capacity building project? Because this is not what you know, we were told. So we didn't know that that was the reason for us not meeting the requirements.
Okay.
Yes.
I see Gerard was going to respond. I think, Gerard, if you can respond, I would really appreciate your input on this. Oh. Okay, so Jared has responded in the chat. He says the R&I elements are very clear. This must have been taken place in the form of a project. Capacity building is not R&I. So it really boils down to the interpretation of it. So what, I mean, we are willing to, if documents are submitted to us early, we are willing to work with you all and try to help you phrase, you know, even if the project is a complex project that has a bit of capacity building and a bit of R&I and such, we will try our best to help you phrase it to, you know, to make it at least sound, to bring out the R&I elements as best as possible. It may not change the fact if it's a predominantly capacity building project, but if there is sufficient, we need to really bring that out. So we are willing to work with you all to help you get the best wording
Barry,
possible.
but let me just see if I note something which Simone is saying. If there is the ability of in the implementation of the projects to reorganize it and recalibrate it to emphasize those elements, and there's a real reorganization of the possibility of any reorganization of the project components to bring the R&I components more into prominence, that is a possibility. Simone seemed to mention that is a possibility. And if that is the case, then it's simply not us trying to put a nice face on a problem, but a real reorganization and bringing out the elements of R&I, that it meets the criteria, because it must. If we cannot make a shoe something else than a shoe. If it is a capacity building project, it is with one or two little components and R&I. But if there are strong R&I components and the project is rethought and recalibrated and re-emphasized to bring out the R&I components to make them meet the eligibility criteria, that is what we can help to do.
Okay. Are there any questions on eligibility criteria? This is probably the most important part. If there are any more questions, we'll take them. If not, we'll move on to the application form. Okay, doesn't seem to have any more questions. So let me move on to the application form. Okay, stuck a little bit. Okay, application form. Okay, so in the application form, it's broken into about 7 sections. Now, each of these sections we will call criteria. So the first section is summary of the project. That one isn't going to be marked, but that is something that we just need it basically gives a broad overview of the project at a glance, right? Now, because I'll be asking, name of the project, your country, just list out your objectives, your output, and put a date of completion, what you estimate the date of completion to be. Now, the reason for this is that we have developed an electronic monitoring system for projects, and if it is, so you awarded a grant, and let's say the output is supposed to be due December 2022, and you meet the deadline, we can say yes, met deadline. If for whatever reason it hasn't been met, it notifies us. We are able to discuss with you. Okay, when do you think we can reasonably get this output? We can set a new date and such. So that's the purpose of having that completion date. Now, in terms of the things we're going to be marked on, competency. So we're going to look at really the combination of your lead and your co-applicants, the contracted parties. Do they have the competence to execute this project? We're also going to ask you the same thing we're asking you to send us, prior. Describe the R&I elements in your project. Bring that out. And basically, we also going to ask you. We will want you to state, well, my organization is established before 2017 in this country, and just some of the things that are in the eligibility documents. We'd like to bring it out in that in this section, because you will be supplying the supporting documents to it. Now, when we get to relevance, relevance of the project, we're looking at how clearly do you identify the problem. How well do you identify an appropriate solution? Are you going to describe the impacts on coastal settlements? How well does this align with policies, the SDGs, the new urban agenda, and other plans and policies? It doesn't have to be all, but you have to choose whatever policies that are relevant to your project, and tell us. But it will be very good if you can describe the SDGs. It's always important if you can build in the SDG element there, but if you have other plans and policies, how it aligns, that will be good. Now, in your methodology, you want to state, well, how do your objectives really align with your target groups and your final beneficiaries? We want to encourage you to use SMART indicators. We want to see that logical chain, that is very clear how you move from objectives to activities to outputs. Now, in terms of your costing, anything above 5,000 euro, you really do need approval from us to purchase beforehand. So it's good if you tell us if there's anything in your budget that's going to cost more than 5,000 euro and explain why. Now, the Gantt chart is not part of the 4 pages. That allows you to list out your activities and give timelines over the 2-year period. Now, number 5 is the innovation potential. Now, as we were saying, the projects have to have some level of innovation. We don't expect you to invent the wheel, but if you are creating a new technology, that's great. if it's an existing technology that's new to the Caribbean, that hasn't been applied in the Caribbean, that's also good. Even if it's not been applied to the country, the local context, that's also innovation. If you're using ideas and concepts from different areas and you're bringing it together in this project, that's also considered innovation. You know, so we also allow you to describe if there's anything beyond this. You know, you explain to us why you think this is an innovative project. Now, we'd also want to know, has there been similar attempts to address this problem? And if there has been, why have they not been as successful? And why is your solution an improvement over the previous attempts? That's always good to come on. And if there are any barriers that you foresee, you know, it's good to list it in this section. In terms of knowledge transfer, now this is during the life of the project. We want to encourage consultative processes. So we'd like to see that you've had a national stakeholder workshop or some sort of process where you're engaging either target groups or final beneficiaries. It will lend well to your scoring. If you're going to engage people, you might have training or you may not. And then we want to know who is really going to utilize the outputs of your project, you know, and make use of it during the life of the project. And then we'd want to know that, okay, who are you aiming to transfer this technology to? You know, what organization is going to take over this project once the funding is ended? And finally, we would want to look at sustainability, which is really post the funding of the project. We'd want to know, okay, if you're handing over the project, now it could be that you could be the app, you could be the organization which is going to continue the project. You know, if you're an agency that's working in the area and you're continuing the project, you know, that's perfectly fine. You're the implementing body post-project. So we'll want to know, how are the implementation bodies going to scale up this innovation? What are they going to do? Are they going to have somebody work on it part-time? Are they going to use the technology? Are they going to gather more data? You know, you know, the technology might just be a demo something, but maybe the institution is going to gather data to make this technology even better. Now, will you be able to monitor or influence the process once it's gotten into the implementation body's hands? That would be useful. We want to know, is it replicable in other CARIFORUM countries? For example, does the problem exist in another CARIFORUM countries? And if it does exist, then you could say, yes, there's the potential for it to be replicated. So we don't have to be vague. We don't have to be saying, well, it's applicable to all. Does the problem exist in another CARIFORUM country? And what could be the potential impacts? And you can describe all the various impacts. So in terms of the application form, do you have any questions? I see Osel, raise your hand, Osel.
Yes, hi everyone. I have a question about the sustainability point, because if I'm remembering well, I saw in one of the documents about the sustainability that it was expected like monitoring of 5 years after the finalization of the project. I am correct?
Well, okay, that was included in terms of, we'd like to send you a questionnaire. Because what happens with us, the EU sends us a post-project evaluation questionnaire, right? So probably about a year after, maybe after that period, even longer period, they will ask you, the EU will ask us, so what has been the impacts of your project? You know, and we ourselves, it's a good habit that we've learned from our RDI fund. It's another grant program we have in the university, where they actually do send out an evaluation questionnaire after every year for about 5 years. And what it's not that we're asking you, what are the potential impacts? Because remember, we want to look at outcomes and impacts. So we know that you're not going, after 2 years of a project, you're probably not going to get impacts. You know, you're lucky to even get outcomes at the end of your 2 year. You know, you're more likely to get outputs. So, you know, if we say we're going to create a GIS tool to do X, we know that at the end of 2 years, you're likely to produce that. But we don't expect you at the end of 2 years to already have outputs to see how that is impacting on your target beneficiaries. You know, that might be too much to ask of projects, but we can ask you 2 years down the line, you know, has it, you know, we stated it in the log frame, but has it had that impact 2 years, 3 years down the line, you know? So it's not going to be any major, well, it's just going to be a simple questionnaire asking about outputs and impacts. That's all it's going to be. But in terms of this sustainability thing, this is what we're asking you all to do, just to predict in terms of, you know, when you develop your technology, you're not developing it in a vacuum. You should be in the back of your mind thinking, okay, how do I give what I've worked for in 2 years, how do I continue its life, right? So we don't want the funding to be spent and nothing comes out of it, you know, after, you know, a year, 2 years later. So this is why we're asking you the questions on sustainability.
All right, Perry, I just noticed a question in there. We will deal with the project, the schedule for responses to the call and evaluation and project initiation. We have a schedule which we've provided in the documentation we shared, but we'll go over that again with everyone in a little while.
Yeah, I saw somebody saying, noting a bit of flexibility to sending eligibility document, confirming that April 15th is
that. Yeah, I was responding to that, yeah.
Oh, okay. I must have missed exactly what you were saying. Yeah.
We'll go through the schedule project in a while.
Okay, I can address it there. Okay, so can we move on to, if there are no other questions on application form? Okay, hold on. Right, budget. Very quickly, when you're doing your calculations, we need the budget in euros, right? So we strongly advise you type in info euro and go to this website. It will come up. And they have a calculator that will calculate your local currency into euros and the month, right? You know, so you're able to quickly put your budget into euros using, you know, using this as a calculator, right? So it's a good standard way for everybody to utilize it. Now, in the budget document that I sent you, that's a very standard EU budget document. So what it will have is your item, whatever cost you have, and you can say, look, maybe you need to hire a project manager. And under project manager, how are we paying this project manager? It's a salary per month. So we would say the unit is a month. And we're saying, okay, we need to hire him for 24 months because the project is 24 months, right? So we put 24 months as the unit. And how much are we paying this person per month? Well, 2,000 euro. And therefore, the total cost is 24 times 48, right? Now, this will be columns A to E, which will give you the 2 year value, the total value for your project. Now, in columns F to I, which is on the other side, we'll just like to calculate for the 1 year. So you know that, well, for 1 year, it will be 12 units, and the unit value would remain the same, but the cost will be half because it wouldn't be 24, it'll be 12. So it'll be 24,000. So you can approach everything like that, okay? And so that should be fairly straightforward. Now, on the second page of the project document, we want you to justify it.
Eric, can I just do this in? It is sometimes easy to clarify and work out your details for the first year of the budget. And therefore, the year one budget is not necessarily half of the overall budget. What we really want is for you to work out as detail as possible. For you must know what you're going to spend in the first year. So the F to I columns is really a detailing that you may have a little more detail, and the overall budget may be a little more general. But we expect that we could see that you've thought through the implementation in year one and F to I. So it's not simply half of A to E. It is really where you've really worked out the detail of year one. All right?
Yeah,
So-
agreed. Because, like I say, you would know your implementation plan. You would know what you need to buy.
And that'll be much clearer for you.
when
Okay,
you
go ahead.
push. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of justification, well, if this is a project manager, well, the person will manage the day-to-day activities of the project, and communications and such, So this is more of a narrative on what the item is, but the justification we estimate to show me in the calculation here, okay, it's 24 months times that. Now, it could become more complex than this, So what if we're talking about, let's say, per diems? We would want to know, let's say, how many people are traveling, in this section here, do the calculations so it's easy for us to follow. So we can look back at the first page and say, okay, this is how you really came up with this figure. And also, what is the basis of this figure? Did you just let's say your hand see that you're going to put on to work on this, let's say 50% of the time. We'd want to know, okay, the person works for X amount of euro, and therefore 50% of their time it's equal to whatever value. So we don't want you to just, pull the figures out of thin air. If they're where the cost, that these are actual costs, by all means put it in there, because we want a realistic budget as far as possible. Okay, any questions on the budget? I see Marcel.
Yes, I have a question from Virginia, because she has a problem with her microphone. So she wants to know if there is a tight quantity of people that one can subcontract into the project, or if it's only on the account of the necessities of the project. I mean, we can only subcontract 5 people or 10 people or 3 people, or it's depend of the necessities.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the nature of your project. I mean, yeah, we don't have any limit. We have no rules on that. Persons to get things done. That should be fine. I don't think there's a requirement that it should be done internally. It's important that you all manage the project, but if you need to get technical resources from elsewhere, and purchase things from elsewhere to make it happen, yes, that
okay.
I don't think there's a any other questions on the budget? Okay, if no questions, we'll just move on quickly. Okay, the logical framework, right? Now, we worked with the EU on this. We supplied you with this version of it. And for those of you who are submitting, we will share our logical framework with you, right? So that you could see the kind of indicators that we have. And it would be very useful if any of your indicators align in your project will also help our project, So, but we can share that with you. But the interim, I'll give you an example of what we're looking, what a goal and the outcomes and the objectives is. So the goal of our project is smart and climate resilient coastal settlements in the Caribbean region. Right? So indicator, and it could have many indicators, you know, it could have one, it could have many. So what we would want to know is how many countries are applying innovations to support planning and management other than the country it was developing. If I develop something in Trinidad and it's taken up in Barbados, Haiti, Guyana, then this is telling me that it's replicable, right? So I'm at the start of the project or whenever you all start your project, maybe 3 other countries would have had it. It could be possible. You can put an estimate in there, right? And how do you verify this? Well, we would say newspapers and reports and such. Now, this is a high-end goal, right? Now, we would want we would say digital and modeling technologies utilized by coastal development agencies and high-level decision makers in CARIFORUM countries for prediction of the impacts of climate change, natural disasters, and planning, right? So the indicator, and I said you could have many
Perry, can you hear me?
indicators.
Perry, I don't think these
Okay.
are actually, I don't think these are, these really sell it, because it is good if the projects are replicable in other Caribbean countries, but these are the logical framework and for the overall project where we administer in a project in the CARIFORUM region. So you have to think about at the local level that it is implemented in particular agencies, it is used, it achieves certain particular objectives within the country around climate smart and resilient development, and replicability in other environment, in other agencies first within the country and possible replications in other countries would be good. But you don't have to demonstrate that as the primary objective of the project. It's more the applicability in the local context that is more primary for the individual country projects. So you have to translate our regional objectives for our regional project in all the CARIFORUM countries to the local context.
Yeah, I was just using it as an example. As I said, you all will have to come up with your own indicators.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying that.
But
Because
I'm just giving you an example. Yeah, that's
they
fine.
may
That's
get
fine.
worried that they have to demonstrate their
Yes,
project.
no. These are just examples of what we have, and I just also wanted to highlight the baseline. That sometimes you don't see baselines. In these ones, they do have. So I'm just trying to make sure that you'll have to kind of to fill it. You'll need to put baselines and years and such. So what we're saying, if our project aimed to get 13 innovations, so that's why we have 13 here. And the project will produce. And realistically, we expect you all, while you can guess at what or predict what your outcomes and impacts will be, we really think that after 2 years, most we can expect is that you're producing outputs. We're just guessing that the innovation technologies might have 5 of them that relate to climate change and natural hazard, the prediction. But another indicator might say, okay, we'll have 3 of them that really expanded data set. So, but that's just for ours. Right? But this is the side. Okay. Any questions on the log frame? Okay. Okay, Asal has a question. Yeah.
Yes, just for a little clarification, the baseline when you in the goal, for example, it's 0, it's where is it stand now, and the target is what you expect to be in that time frame, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So if at the start of your project, whatever your indicator is, if it hasn't been accomplished yet, you could put 0. If there's already a background of a higher value, that's great. But if 0 is perfectly fine as a baseline, if that is the figure. And I said, whatever year, should really be 2 years after you start your project, should be a target. Well, at least for your outputs. So it should be 24 will be your target year. And as I said, for the goal, for the impact, you could predict down the line, 2-3 years after, 2 years after your project is complete. So you can use 2026 for goal as a year, right? But generally, you would want to see, what year, and even the outcomes, you can use 2026 if you wanted. Yes? Okay. In terms of the activity matrix of your log frame, sections. So and then we listed out the activities. So we said, okay, to run the pilots, we need pilot call guidelines, a selection report, pilot project development and monitoring evaluation workshop. We had granted we would start the pilot projects, and so you can work out how your activities flow. And then of course we would want the cost, which is like a summary of the budget, your assumptions, whatever your assumptions are, and the preconditions and such. So as I said, everybody is aware that a log frame, in that one little document, that should tell you, the vast majority of your project. Somebody should be able to read it, So any questions at all again on activity matrix of, of log frame?
Perry, there's a specific question from Jamil Halu. I don't know if you want to address it now or you want to.
Okay, where is it?
It says, what should be the
right.
no.
I said, what should be the project duration, minimum, maximum, and what are the requirements for? Okay, so what we're going to the duration is, if I understand your question, is it's a 2-year project. So you really want to take the 2 years to execute this project. So
but Perry,
if by chance
that is a maximum. It's a maximum of 2 years. It is a maximum of 2
right.
years.
So I'm saying, right. So if you can finish the project in less time, you put in time period, but you can't go over 2 years because unfortunately the finished financial reporting and everything. So it could be less than 2 years, but it can't be more than 2 years. And the requirements for reporting, we're going to ask you for financial reporting every 6 months, right? So you're sending to ask you every 3 months, just give us an update on your project. So as simple as these are your outputs, where have you reached? We're not asking for a big report. We just want something to know that we're monitoring. We're just monitoring. That's why I asked you, Austin, and once we know, okay, we've hit that target or we've not hit that target, we need to have a conversation. That's all we need. So it's not a big report, just your output, a little narrative perhaps on it. And did you hit it or did you not hit the target? You know. All right. If no other questions on that, I'll just delve into stakeholder reports. When we initially concept.
Perry, can you hear me?
Conceptualize the project. Yeah,
Perry,
hear you.
I mean, yeah. We schedule an hour-and-a-half meeting. We're 10 minutes
Okay.
away from the end. What I would like to suggest we do is that you go to the project schedule, do that, and then come back in afterwards to deal with these matters.
Okay, sure. Okay, yeah, we can deal with the evaluation process after. Let's look at the deadline. The key things to note, we published the call on the 1st. Today's the clarification session. Now, the request for eligibility documentation, this is really up to you. It will help if we start to get just that little write-up on the RNI project, any supporting documents for it, your certificate of incorporation, if you have it. The earlier we get this, the more likely we're able to discuss with the EU and see if there are any challenges. Because once we get past this phase, it's very easier. Once we know that you're eligible, it makes life a lot easier, right? And so you can send it at any point, but the earlier you send it, the better, okay? The draft is that we're having a project development and monitoring evaluation workshop where we basically are going to help you. If we get a draft proposal, we will help you with your proposal. We'll look at it. We'll say, okay, you could strengthen this area. So it allows you to have somebody look at it. It doesn't have to be complete. It can be very vague. But you will benefit from it. If you can't do it, well, we accept that you can't do it, but for those of you who can, you will benefit from it because you would get the guidance. You'd get guidance from the people who will evaluate your project after, because normally you don't get that when people submit proposals. Our objective is to make sure that we have strong proposals. We don't want to just have a lot of proposals and eliminate. We want to ensure that whoever submits get the value, that at the end of the process, their proposal is strong, and you learn a little bit more about proposal, writing strong proposals. So we hope to have 7th of May is make sure that they were simplified and all the documents were simplified as possible. So we're hoping that those documents could come in and all the final eligibility documents. Now, as I said, if we could get to the small amount of documents early, we're able to give you feedback so that, if you have any challenges, we're able to deal with it before the 7th of May. Now, in terms of, we hope to tell you whether you've been successful or not by the 13th of June. And we hope there will be a contract to sign. So we'll send you the draft contract. You all will, review it. And that is when we initiate the project. If it can be done earlier, great, but this is the latest it could be done. Any questions on the timeline?
Just want to emphasize something here. As Perry said, we this is a process of working with you all, helping you to review the documents, what you present, including the project development and monitoring evaluation workshop, to really make sure that we have strong proposals. And very often, even after you submit the final proposal and is evaluated, there may be things we need to clarify and check and so on between when you're given a provisional award to when a final award is made. So this is an iterative process. We do have some firm deadlines where everybody submits certain things, but we will be working with to get strong applications in, and then we'll be working subsequent to the pre-selection to make sure that they meet the other criteria that we want. So there may be post-submission clarifications that are required as well to strengthen and to firm up and to clarify issues, all right? So of course, at each stage, the best quality you put forward will help us to move it along, but this is not a closed door, submit the documents, you don't hear from us, you don't get feedback, and just get a notice of award or not. We really want to make sure that the resources are made available by the EU ACP, are utilized properly and effectively to achieve the overall project objectives in the region. That is our objective as a lead. And we get support from the EU ACP to meet those objectives because they're constantly available to us to provide clarity as we go forward in making decisions and improving the applications. I just want to make that general comment. So this process is one of having open doors as much as possible and dealing with the applicants to improve it all the way along the process until final award.
Right, and as mentioned, you're not going to be penalized even if you don't submit the draft. I think at this point we can open for questions because of the short period of time. I don't think we need to deal with how we're going to market. Right, so any questions at this point?
Harry, there's a question in chat regarding the Declaration of Honor. The Declaration of Honor has been, technically they're asking who has to complete the Declaration of Honor? Does it have to be filled by the authority of the institution, or in their case, the Vice Chancellor of R&I, or by the main researcher of the project?
Head your organization, somebody in who has the right to speak for your organization. Whatever level that is. It's not for the lead researcher. It's for your administration. And just quickly stating, if you go to this web page, point 10, you'll see all the listings, but the document itself will describe a lot of what you're saying that your organization is not involved in. But for further information, do go to this website, and I'll send you the presentations. Have everybody's email. We'll send out the presentation. So we'll post it on our website as well. Just quickly, the 3 stakeholder reports. We would like you, when you have a draft report, to send it to ideal target groups of final beneficiaries and get some feedback on it. Because oftentimes we develop projects without, if you get some feedback on it, you don't have to incorporate the recommendations, or if you do incorporate it, make mention of what you incorporate.
Perry, at this particular stage, we already said we will post the slides on the website so everybody can see them. At this particular stage, I'd like to suggest that we give Gerard a chance. Like, for example, this would be made available on the this would be available on the website, right? I'd like to at this point give Gerard the opportunity to make any additional comments or points he would like to do before most people, if they want to leave or schedule the time to leave. Gerard, the floor is yours if you'd like to make any comments at this point.
I think unfortunately Gerard got bumped off the team at this point.
Yeah, I know Gerard is in the Cameroon, and he said he may have had some difficulties. So if Gerard is not on here,
He's
Perry,
not Azad, he got bumped off.
all right, well, Perry, you could proceed. I think we should prioritize the next thing you think important so that people who are leaving, have started to leave, will get the most pertinent information.
And Asad, you have a question?
Yes, I have two quick questions. In some time, in a previous meeting that we had some months ago, you mentioned it about the possibility of working with two cities. This is a must in the project, or we can focus in the development of the project in one city? And
No, it's all about your project.
okay.
Yeah, whatever it is your project is, it's your project.
Okay, and the other one is about the stakeholders. Is, for example, in some of our communities and our coastal cities are under development, most of them, and maybe it will be a kind of difficult to find a strong stakeholders on the places. So we were thinking about that frog in the way.
It's something that we encourage that you do it, because but we're not penalizing you for not doing it, but it's the sort of thing that it actually helps your project, because one of the questions within the application form is, did you have any consultative process? So, and well, not that is the best one to answer that question, but we would encourage you to, even if it's somebody else working in your field, another planner, that sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a grassroots person.
Yeah, or the stakeholder doesn't have to be the final beneficiary at the level of communities. It could be an agency, it could be other technical people working in the field. So stakeholder is a very broad term here. It does not mean only final beneficiaries at the community level. If you have access to information or report or something like that, yes, or you've been working with a community and you have that of course will be useful, but that is not a requirement. Stakeholders is a broad term here. Anybody who will be involved in or benefit from the implementation of a project like that is what we mean by stakeholder.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'd like to suggest that we go to the close.
Okay, good morning to everyone. If you would just indulge me for the 5 minutes, I just wanted to leave us with some takeaway pointers as we get ready to submit the proposals. Are you seeing my screen in full screen? Or, okay, wonderful.
Both.
You're seeing both?
Yeah, the presenter's notes.
Oh, okay. So that's what I need to change then, sorry. Is that okay for you now?
Yes.
Yes, Nicole.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. So according to the UN ECLAC, for the period 2000 to 2021, the Caribbean recorded 326 disasters associated with natural hazards, with the highest incidence in 2004 and 2017. Now, the State of the Caribbean report, which I have up on the screen, it confirms that all climate parameters are changing. Sea level rise is expected to reach or exceed 1 meter by the end of the century. Air and sea surface temperatures are trending upwards, and global climate models suggest that the region may be up to 17% drier by the end of the century. The record-breaking 2020 hurricane season and Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017 provide insights to the anticipated 80% increase in the frequency of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes over the next 80 years. The latter resulted in 226% of GDP loss in Dominica. And in 2019, in the Bahamas, the strongest hurricane on record to affect that country resulted in 3.4 billion in damages. And it's not only the hydrometeorological events that we have to plan for, but seismic threats. You would have heard of La Soufrière affecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They are still grappling with the effects. And there's a complexity that is added from biological threats like COVID-19. Colleagues, the fact is that the trend is that the damages are exceeding the size of the economy of our states. And we are reminded that the region continues to build potential loss, and these are the disasters that have not yet happened. In fact, I want to just leave us with this point: disasters are not natural. Evidence shows that whilst the lives lost to disasters is reducing, the losses and damages are increasing. We can change the outcome. A multi-pronged approach is needed. And this Hit Reset project focuses on providing the region with digital and modeling technologies that can improve the prediction of the impacts of climate change and disasters from natural hazards, and also improve planning and management of coastal communities in the Caribbean region. I close with some recommendations, therefore, from an article written by Miku and Baraf, 2021 article that is called Sustainable Development Goal 11 and a New Urban Agenda for Caribbean Small Islands Developing States, Policy, Practice, and Action. They provide 8 recommendations for attention in view of the policy and practice context of Caribbean Small Island Developing States in support of SDG number 11, which is make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And all of these recommendations are important to this project. And I just want to highlight 3 specifically. Number 1, mainstreaming disaster risk reduction, climate change into policy and practice is necessary to achieve more resilient urban settlements. Secondly, inclusive urbanization and participatory integrated spatial planning is a necessity. And finally, we need to move the needle as it relates to decision support tools and technologies in order to expedite the design and delivery of more inclusive, livable, safe, resilient, and sustainable city environments. I quote, drawing on the best data, analytics, innovation, and technology is critical to conducting diagnostics of what is working and what's not working, I encourage you, therefore, to put forward bold, innovative, and practical proposals. We look forward to your proposals, and I wish you the very best. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Nicole, for those excellent words of closing. Asad, anything you'd like to add? Okay, well then, I'd like to thank everybody for being here, and we hope that you get some excellent projects. So everybody, please have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.